This episode covers 3 days, April 24th, 25th, and 26th, 2024, which were days 14, 15, and 16 of my great American motorcycle adventure. Louisville to Nashville is about 175 miles, which should take maybe 3 hours. I took a slightly less direct route. My meanderings over these 3 days took me more than 700 miles, from Louisville into Illinois, over to St. Louis, Cape Girardeau, and finally down to Nashville. It was a 3-day stretch full of contrasts. A dark, cold cave and lush greenery, lively cities and an abandoned town, twisty roads and straight-shot highways, miles of solitude, and lunch with family. Let me tell you about the ride. Day 14 started in Louisville with blue skies and an open plan. It also started with me completely forgetting to turn on my camera and start the recording. I am still getting used to the camera setup and remote. Sorry about that. It was about an hour-and-a-half ride south to Mammoth Cave National Park, which was the highlight of the day. The rangers did a great job sharing the cave's checkered history, from its early use as a shelter by Native Americans, to how enslaved miners worked there to extract saltpeter to make gunpowder for the War of 1812, to its brief and highly unsuccessful use as a tuberculosis hospital. As a natural phenomenon, there's something humbling about standing in those ancient caverns, knowing their history, and that there are hundreds of miles of caves still unexplored beneath your feet. The ride there and back northwest to Evansville was pretty uneventful. About 170 miles of highway. Not a particularly scenic stretch, but visiting the cave was well worth it. Day 15 was the longest ride of this stretch, just over 300 miles. I had plans to meet with some family, Donette's cousins, for lunch in St. Louis, which was about a 3-hour ride, so I got an early start. As I got closer and closer to St. Louis, I found myself wondering when I'd actually get to see its iconic arch. Eventually, the Gateway Arch came into view. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have time to visit. I'll have to come back on another trip. I met up with cousins David and Rebecca for lunch. They had visited us in New York City a few years ago, and it was so nice to see them again and catch up. We met at Bailey's Range. The food was great, and it was nice to get a little dose of family connection. My original plan for the afternoon was to head into the Mark Twain National Forest to enjoy some twisty roads. But as we finished lunch, the skies were looking a bit ominous. My weather apps were warning of storms in the area, so I changed plans and I headed directly to Cape Girardeau, which turned out to be a nice little town. I stayed near the highway and did dinner at Say's Kitchen Express, really solid Mexican food. And right across the street was the world's largest fountain drink cup. 15 feet tall, holds just under 5,000 gallons, and built by the neighboring Rhodes convenience store and gas station. A quirky, unexpected little roadside attraction. Day 16 started with my second crossing of the Mississippi River on this trip, and a beautiful ride into southern Illinois. I passed through several small towns, but one that really stood out was Cairo. Cairo was the planned destination for Huck and Jim in the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It also gave its name to the USS Cairo, an ironclad warship built during the Civil War. It was sunk by a mine in 1862 and raised in 1964 to be used as a museum ship. And I actually saw the remains of the Cairo back in 2004 on a previous motorcycle trip through Vicksburg. The town itself was heartbreaking. Once a bustling port city at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, Cairo went through decades of turmoil, racial conflict, and economic decline. It was evacuated during the devastating floods of 2011 when the water threatened to overtop the levees. The whole city was cleared out, and it never recovered. As I rode through town, there's a beautiful iron arch that reads Historic Downtown Cairo, but there's nothing left behind it. Empty streets, abandoned buildings, a heavy silence. Riding through kind of felt like riding through a ghost town, with layers of forgotten history. From there I crossed the Ohio River and dropped down into the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area. And that was a total shift. Rolling forest roads, lakes on either side, and no traffic. Of course it was Friday. I imagine the weekends get busier. But today it felt like the whole place was mine. I stopped at the Golden Pond Visitor Center, which, cool twist, has a planetarium. The ranger told me that they get tons of school groups, and I love that that's available. I also got to see their bison herd lounging in the sun. It was a cool moment seeing bison. Though I didn't know it yet, I'd be stuck in a full-on bison jam for hours in Yellowstone National Park later on the trip. Compared to that, this was a very mellow intro. After the park, I hit the highway towards Nashville. It was warm and clear, maybe even a little hot, but there was great riding weather. Not much traffic until I hit Clarksville. While I was riding through this perfect weather, I later learned that just a few hundred miles to the northwest, a major tornado outbreak was unfolding across Nebraska and Iowa. Over 24 tornadoes touched down that day. Homes and businesses were destroyed. Entire communities were impacted. The devastation around Lincoln was especially terrible. It was the strongest tornado event in that region in nearly a decade. It's sobering. While I was surrounded by peace and beauty and lush green forests, others were experiencing unimaginable loss. It's just one more reminder of how unpredictable and fragile this world can be. I rolled into Nashville that night. It was the first time I'd been there in about 20 years. I had a great dinner at Las Palmas restaurant and chatted with some friendly folks at the bar. A warm welcome after a long and beautiful day. These last 3 days covered a lot of ground. Underground wonder, city energy, empty roads, and echoes of the past. Being able to experience all of this, not just the scenery and the cities, but the space to connect and reflect as I go. That's what this trip is all about. Even now, almost a year later as I make these videos, I'm getting to relive those moments, and I hope you're enjoying them too. If you're enjoying my meanderings, please like, subscribe, and drop a comment, and share. I'll be back in this area again later this year, and would love your tips and suggestions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next ride.